Imagine you are standing in a small shelter 40,000 years ago. There are 9 other people packed in around you. A fire is burning in the middle. Nobody in that shelter has ever seen soap. Nobody has ever used deodorant. Nobody has washed with hot water because hot water, as a thing you can simply have, does not exist yet. Now take a breath. What does that room smell like? Most of us assume we already know the answer. We picture our ancestors as filthy, hair matted, skin caked, a permanent cloud of stink following them across the landscape. It is such a comfortable assumption that almost nobody stops to question it. It is baked into every cartoon caveman you have ever seen. But the evidence tells a much stranger story, and parts of it suggest that ancient humans may have thought about their own smell far more carefully than you do. So in this video, we're going to answer the question properly, not with a guess, but with what the bones, the teeth, and the chemistry actually show. We will start with why humans smell at all, which turns out to be far weirder than it sounds because your sweat has no odor whatsoever. Then we will look at what ancient humans could actually do about it without a single bar of soap existing anywhere on Earth. We will get to a red mineral they may have been using as deodorant 100,000 years ago, and to the evidence for prehistoric dentistry, and to the one situation where smelling bad could genuinely get you killed. And at the end, we will look at when soap finally showed up, because that date is much later than most people expect. By the time we are done, the caveman in your head is going to look very different. Here is the first thing almost everyone gets wrong. Sweat is odorless. All of it. The stuff pouring off you on a hot day comes from eccrine glands, spread across nearly your whole body, and it is basically water and salt. Its entire job is cooling. It evaporates, it carries heat away, and it smells like nothing at all. The smell comes from somewhere else. Tucked into your armpits and your groin are different glands called apocrine glands. They do not switch on until puberty, which is exactly why small children do not have body odor no matter how hard they play or how long they refuse to bathe. And what these glands release is not watery sweat at all. It is a much thicker fluid, loaded with fats and proteins and sugars. That fluid is also odorless. The smell is not made by your body. It is made by something living on it. Your skin is covered in bacteria, and a few specific species have figured out how to eat what your apocrine glands put out. One of them, Staphylococcus hominis, takes an odorless molecule from your sweat and strips it down into a compound called a thioalcohol. That is the sharp, sulfurous smell you know as body odor, and it is not the only one. Other bacteria produce entirely different notes. Some species break down a protein building block into a compound that smells strongly of old cheese. Others produce a scent researchers describe as goat-like. One creates something distinctly oniony. So your armpit is not producing a smell. It is running a farm. You supply the food, the bacteria do the work, and the smell is what they leave behind. That also explains why armpits and feet are the worst offenders. They combine dense glands with warmth and trapped moisture, which is close to ideal conditions for growing bacteria. And it explains why washing works. You are not removing a smell. You are removing the population producing it. Even age changes the recipe. The particular smell associated with the very elderly comes from a compound called 2-non-enol, produced when fats in aging skin break down. It is not poor hygiene. It is chemistry. And here's the detail that should stop you. Not everyone has this at all. There is a gene called ABCC11, and in some people it simply does not function. When it does not, the sweat molecules never reach the skin surface, so the bacteria have nothing to eat and almost no odor is produced. This non-functional version is common across East Asian populations, found in roughly 80 to 95% of people, which means body odor is not a universal human condition. It never was. Now to the harder question. Did ancient humans do anything about the way they smelled? This is genuinely difficult to answer because behavior does not fossilize. Nobody washing in a river 40,000 years ago left a record of it. There is no artifact for a habit. A stone tool survives. A routine does not. So researchers work backwards and they start from a simple observation. Being dirty is dangerous. Lice, fleas, and intestinal parasites thrive in filth, and an infestation inside a small group that sleeps shoulder to shoulder is not an inconvenience. It is a threat to everyone in that shelter. Under those conditions, grooming is not vanity, it is survival behavior. And when you ask what we would expect from a species under that kind of pressure, you get a specific list of predictions. They should have groomed each other to pull out parasites. They should have kept sleeping areas clear of waste. They should have relieved themselves away from where they lived and slept. They should have kept their distance from the visibly sick and from strangers who might carry unfamiliar diseases. Every one of those behaviors shows up in living humans. Every one of them shows up in other primates, which suggests hygiene is not something humans invented at some point in history. It is something we inherited, already running, long before we were recognizably us. And there is direct physical evidence, too. Neanderthals appear to have used seashells as tweezers to pluck hair. Some early cave art depicts men without beards, which points toward deliberate grooming rather than neglect. Somebody was maintaining themselves. These were not people who had given up. But grooming is not the same as being cleaned. So what could you actually do without soap? Considerably more than you would think. Certain plants make their own. Soapwort and horsetail contain compounds called saponins, which foam up in water and lift oils off skin much the way detergent does. And this is not obscure knowledge that requires a laboratory. Anyone crushing plants near water over thousands of years is going to notice the one that lathers. Once one person notices, everyone in that group knows. Beyond that, sand scours. Wood ash is mildly caustic and cuts through grease, which is the same basic principle soap works on. Rough fibrous stems make a serviceable scrubber. Fat and plant oils can be rubbed into skin and hair, and then wiped off carrying dirt with them. None of this is speculation about what was possible. All of it works. People still do versions of it today. And there is a reason so many archaeological sites cluster along rivers, lakes, and springs. Drinking water is the obvious explanation, but those same sites were also where you washed, where you cleaned tools, where you cooled off, where you dealt with blood after a kill. The picture that emerges is not a person who never washed in their entire life. It is a person who washed with whatever the landscape provided, which was far less effective than a hot shower and a bottle of body wash, but is a very long way from nothing. Now, the strangest part of this story. For over 100,000 years, humans have been using red ochre. It is an iron-rich earth pigment, and it turns up everywhere archaeologists dig. In burials, in cave paintings, on tools, on bodies. The standard explanation has always been symbolic. Red as the color of blood, red as ritual, red as identity. But there may be a much more practical reason sitting underneath the symbolism. Red ochre is chemically active in sunlight. Exposed to sun, it produces reactive chemical species that can kill bacteria and viruses, and that break down smelly organic compounds into odorless gas. In plain terms, smeared onto skin and left in the sun, ochre can sterilize and it can deodorize. For a nomadic hunter handling raw meat and carcasses constantly with no soap and no reliable hot water, that is not decoration. That is a genuinely useful tool. And there's a hypothesis about where the idea came from that is genuinely remarkable. The bearded vulture, a bird that once ranged widely across the regions early humans occupied, deliberately bathes in red ochre mud. It feeds on carcasses and then it goes and coats itself in exactly this mineral. If early humans watched that bird closely, and they had every reason to watch scavengers closely because scavengers lead you to food, they may have copied the behavior and then discovered that it worked. We cannot prove that is how it began, but it does raise the possibility that one of the oldest and most mysterious human habits on record was partly about something very ordinary, not smelling like a corpse. There is one source of smell we have not covered yet, and it is the one that actually hurts. Teeth. Ancient diets were tough, fibrous, and abrasive, often carrying grit from stone grinding. Teeth wore down badly and food packed into the gaps, And we know they noticed because they left marks that survive. Neanderthal teeth from the Krapina site in Croatia, roughly 130,000 years old, carried toothpick grooves along with scratches on teeth that had been pushed out of their normal positions. Researchers who examined them read the pattern as someone working at a painful spot, repeatedly trying to relieve it. Not eating, treating. A separate tooth from a Polish cave shows the same spindle-shaped groove, worn by the in and out motion of a toothpick, from about 46,000 years ago. And then there is El Cidrón in Spain. One Neanderthal there had a dental abscess, and trapped in the hardened plaque on their teeth were traces of poplar. Poplar contains salicylic acid. That is the active ingredient in aspirin. The same individual also carried traces of a penicillium mold, the kind that produces antibiotics. Someone with a rotting tooth, tens of thousands of years before dentistry existed as an idea, was chewing a painkiller. And now, the practical reason all of this mattered far more to them than it does to you. Human body odor is unusually strong for a mammal. We forget this because we wash it off every single morning before anyone has to experience it. But essentially, every animal you might want to hunt has a dramatically better sense of smell than you do. Downwind, a human being is announced long before they are seen. That reframes the entire picture. Masking your scent with smoke, with animal fat, with ochre, with crushed aromatic plants is not grooming, and it is not fashion. It is hunting equipment. A hunter who smelled like a human came home with nothing. A hunter who smelled like the landscape ate, and so did everyone depending on him. Which means the pressure to manage your own smell was not social, it was nutritional. So when does soap actually enter the story? Much later than most people assume. Not in the Stone Age, and not by accident in a river. A medical text from ancient Egypt called the Ebers Papyrus, dating to around 1500 years before the Common Era, contains instructions for combining animal and vegetable oils with salt, producing something recognizable as soap. It was used for washing and also for treating skin conditions. The Greeks took cleanliness seriously as well. They used soap. They built public washing places, and they invented an early form of the shower that sprayed the user with water. The wealthiest households had private bathrooms. But notice the time scale. Anatomically, modern humans have existed for something in the region of 300,000 years. Soap shows up in the written record roughly 3,500 years ago. For the overwhelming majority of our existence as a species, every single human being alive handled their own smell without it. So, did ancient humans stink? Almost certainly, by your standards. There was no soap, no laundry, no running hot water, no clean change of clothes, and wood smoke soaked into absolutely everything they owned and everything they were. But that is the wrong comparison to make, because everyone around them smelled the same way. And a smell that everyone shares is not a smell anyone notices. Your nose adjusts to constants. It only reports change. What actually comes through in the evidence is not indifference. It is effort. Plucking hair out with shells, picking at an aching tooth for hours, choosing a red mineral that happened to kill bacteria, building camps beside water, chewing bark that dulled pain. They were not filthy people who did not care. They were people who cared a great deal, working with almost nothing in a world that gave them no help at all. And the only real difference between them and you is that you were handed the solution in a bottle,